overview of what we're going to be covering tonight. The college search process, standardized testing, applying admissions decision plans, NAVIANCE, family connections and scholarships, service academies, ROTC, NCAA process, and just kind of what to expect looking ahead. So, a lot of myths. Boys are very funny, and some of the questions they come and ask us, they make us laugh often. So these are some of the myths, these next two slides, about some of the things that we hear from the boys. One of my personal favorites is that I've never heard of that college, so it can't be any good. And then we're like, no, we wouldn't tell you to go apply to college if we wasn't a good college. Trust us, we want you to be successful. And typically when we meet with your sons, we try to have them have a really nice list of colleges if they haven't already built it. And sometimes they might tell us what colleges they really like. When we look at their admissions criteria and what they're looking at for GPA test scores, and your son might be kind of close or on the cusp, then we want to try to identify other colleges that might be more closely in line with their test scores, with their GPA, as a backup plan. Because it's always good to have your dream school and have a plan B, a plan C, and sometimes a D, E, and F as well. Because what we try to tell your sons is that come spring of their senior year, we want them to have the choice of where to go, not to be the other way around when there's only one positive admissions decision, unless that's the one and done and that's all they need. And if that's the case, that's fantastic. But again, it's always nice for them to have a nice choosing, a nice sort of colleges so they can choose from. Again, just more myths here on this slide. Do you have a person?
Yeah, the one that I think parents kind of go towards is East Coast colleges prefer the SAT and Midwest colleges prefer the ACT. A lot's changed with the testing and preferred testing. So really, colleges just want to either see one or the other, and sometimes they don't want to see them at all. A lot more schools are moving and adopting test optional policies. Now, this is the trick with the boys. They think test optional means, oh good, they're not going to look at the test score. But then we remind them, well, they are going to look at your GPA and your classes. So they put more weight on that. And you should see the light bulb moment that goes off once that conversation has taken place. So there's a lot going on with testing right now in general. So there's a lot of different policies that could potentially be coming out that may affect your sons and how they apply, specifically next fall when ACT is allowing students to go and take one section of the test if they want to. So if they're not happy with their math score, they can go in on a Saturday and just take the math test, which is very new. But we've even seen some universities kick back and say, you know what, we're only going to accept the test score that if it's done all 4 sections. So wait and see a little bit on that. I think a lot more policy will come out this summer.
Until September, so for your boys, we hope that everyone has at least taken the ACT once by that time. So we'll see what how the process rolls out. It's a wait and see for us as well.
And one other myth that I really like is senior year, as soon as I'm admitted, I don't have to work hard in school anymore. That is a myth. They will definitely be looking at final high school transcripts before allowing a student to come onto campus the next fall. So we're having that conversation with our seniors right now.
So how do you start? And again, these are some of the funny things that we hear from the boys, that sometimes their friend groups all apply to the same school, and then we have to remind the boys that they're all looking for very different things. So again, we try to have the boys do a lot of self-reflection, and that takes time, and they change their mind over the next year. But it's kind of fun when we start talking to them about and asking them what they're looking for, what they're hoping for out of a college. The college that I can afford, and I think my other personal favorite on this one is the college that does not require an essay. We have some boys come to us and they tell us some colleges that they're interested in applying to, and then we remind them that this particular school requires 6 different essays, and then they say, never mind. I don't want to go to that school. So it really is how hard do they want to work? And that's, again, part of the questions that we start asking them this time of year is, as we start building the list and reminding them to do their research and really delve into what the admissions policies are for each of the different schools. So again, how do we start? Self-assessment, like I just said. So hopefully freshman, sophomore year, your boys were doing their assessments in NAVIANCE. Some of them have done them, some of your sons have not. And this is a time that we remind them if they haven't done the assessments that we like them to do the assessments. They don't think it's worth their time to do the assessments, but we remind them why it's valuable to do those assessments. They really give a lot of insight to how they learn best. So when we start talking to them about the admissions process, we'll ask them, well, what did the survey say? How do the learning style inventory and do what you are. Those really give a lot of valuable insight into how they learn best, so they can help discern for themselves, are they better suited in a larger university where it's lecture style and they sit in a classroom and take notes, or do they need more interaction and need to be in a smaller group setting and have that back and forth with the professor and with their classmates? Because everyone does learn differently. Or do they need a combination of the two? So this is why we ask them to do the assessments. And again, if they haven't done them yet, we will do them with them. Mm-hmm. So this week, we're starting to meet with your sons in their advisories. We were in 3 advisories today, and we'll get through all the juniors by the end of the week. We're handing them back their PSAT scores. I know they already got them a long time ago and they were NAVIANCE, but just the paper copy so they can actually read the assessments. So you can ask your sons by the end of the week to see if they got those forms, and they can give them to you and share. You can have a conversation about the PSAT forms. And we're also talking about letters of rec, and we're telling your sons that it's time now to start setting up meetings one-on-one with either Casey or I. So this is when we like to sit down with your sons and really try to get to know them a little better.
And of course, we openly invite, if any of you would like to sit down with us as well with your son, that's completely something we'd like to do as well.
Yep, so again, every family is different. Sometimes families want to meet together. Sometimes you want us to meet with your son first and meet with us. So again, whatever works best for your family, just let us know. Consider your priorities. We want the boys to keep an open mind, like I said earlier. Just because they haven't heard of that school, it doesn't mean it's not a great school. Research is key, and sometimes cost of attendance can be one of those things that students have to be cognizant of. So we encourage parents also, if you haven't had a conversation yet with your sons regarding how you're going to pay for college and if scholarships are important, this is a great time to start having that conversation. Just so when we start building the list with your sons, we want to make sure that all the schools that are on the list are at least in the realm of possibility that you can afford. As we know, some colleges give a lot more generous with scholarships than others.
And there's also tools and assessments that we can help you kind of go through as well with the cost of college.
So the self-assessments, like I mentioned earlier, we want the boys to go online, do these assessments, and then we have a college counseling survey review, letter of rec survey that we have in NAVIANCE that we want them to fill out. And that's a great way for us to start our conversation with your sons. Again, try to ask them, we ask really probing, annoying questions, and they try to give us like one-word answers, and then we just keep digging and digging and digging until we can finally extract some more information and start our dialogue. So again, these are the types of questions that we ask your sons. Again, like I said, how you learn best, how do they imagine college to be like, what will the students be like? Again, all these questions, how they answer it helps us help them identify potential schools that they would be happy to attend come their freshman year after they graduate from here.
The assessments also, they don't know it, but they're quick twitch answers. So in reality, once they're done, they can read a full report about what their 3 strengths are. They can read a full report on what type of learning environment are they going to be best in? Are they a practical hands-on learner? Are they a theoretical learner? So it gives them also terminology about themselves that they're not used to articulating to anyone really in verbal or written form. So what it does set up is a really nice tool for writing your college essay. So if you're saying, I know I would do best in a lecture-based environment because I can take real or theoretical thought from a book and put it into practice. So it does also aid them when they have to go through the essay writing process, gives them some tools that they can identify. Normally when we go into a room and say, tell me what your top 3 strengths are, you usually get hardworking, friendly, and determined. And I'm like, wow, you all have the same strengths. That's amazing. But the assessments do things like, you're an arranger. Oh yeah, I do like to arrange things and have order. I am the first one that's going to organize my friends to get together and go do an activity. I mean, those are some of the things that colleges are really looking for. So these tools kind of provide that vocabulary that maybe they're not ready to articulate themselves, but at least gives them a way to kind of think about it.
And then the other thing that we go over with your sons is, what are their priorities? Some boys will tell us that they want that Saturday game day experience where the whole campus goes to football games, or the whole campus is excited about baseball games, or just a lot of school spirit. Sometimes it's the religious group, sometimes it's Greek life, sometimes it's Greek life and they want to make sure that the fraternities have houses and then they want to live in a Greek home. Resources for their major. If you're thinking about pre-med, you may want to think about going to a college that has hospitals close by that they can do volunteer and internships. If they're thinking about journalism, they want to think about what's close by. If they're thinking about politics, are they in a state capital? Is that close by? So again, trying to correspond what their potential major might be and what resources are in the community that the university is in. Distance from home. Do they want to come home, or can you afford to send them home, bring them home, or whenever they want to come home if they're homesick? Do you want a plane ride or you want a car ride? So those are things to think about. And then, climate and culture, finances and cost, and the size of the school, and what's the class size. Here they're used to really small classes. Are they excited to go to a university and they have 800 other students in the class with them? Or would that really freak them out and they probably would rather be in a smaller class with the similar size classroom that they have here at SCA? These are all things you need to think about as you start applying to colleges and start building your list. Thank you.
So the college search process, it can happen pretty organically. A lot of times it's Google searches. A lot of times it's sitting down with us. A lot of times it's visiting all the reps that come to STA and present to the boys what the school has to offer to them. So there's a lot of different ways to engage. Obviously, the ones that are happening here in the school are right here, and we make announcements. We put it on the board. We do it. We'll have it online. So there really shouldn't be a reason why they would miss a college that would come for a visit. And even if they do or they can't get out of class, the reps are more than happy to connect with them individually afterwards. And sometimes that can make an even more personalized connection. Plug our college fair that's taking place at the Academy of Holy Angels on April 22nd. Awesome resources. There'll be, I think, about 130 colleges there in attendance from all over the country. They're coming up for the entire week. So they make about 6 different stops, and one of them is just to meet with our students, visitation, and also Academy of Holy Angels. Counselor meetings, a big part of what Norma and I do is just try to put together some ideas for them to consider. Putting together a list or hearing what their feedback is about a school after maybe they visited it really helps us out. So usually in the springtime and summer, that's kind of maybe where you find a little bit of time to maybe sneak off and get a college visit in. We always get asked, is it best to visit during the school year? Definitely. But if the only time that you can get on campus is in the summer, that's still worthwhile. So we talk about those and a couple of things that boys should kind of be ready to do when they go on a campus visit. It isn't just to walk around and look at Gothic architecture. It's really more intended to utilize that time to get what you need from the Office of Admissions or from the students so that you can say, this is a school I would really like to maybe attend, or, you know what, I don't really like these aspects. So we give them a little bit of tools to put in their back pocket when they go off to campuses as well. And those are some of the things that we have when we have our conversations with them one-on-one.
And when y'all are planning your campus visits, the more leeway time you can give the admissions office that you're coming, the better visit you could have. Some colleges will let you have interviews, some will let you sit on a class, some will let you meet with current students. So I'd say ask for everything and see what you can get. But usually if you can plan ahead, most universities are willing to try to work with you to make sure that you have a wonderful visit because they recognize how important the campus visit is. Also, another word of advice we tell the students is when you're on campus visits is to pick up the school newspaper. It's a great way for you to hear, what the current students are excited about and passionate about. Again, trying to get a flavor of the campus life by reading the school newspaper.
So what do colleges look for? The main thing that they're going to look for, and almost every college and university tells us this, is academic performance in the curriculum that the student chooses to take. Okay? Performing well in the classes and having good grades, quite honestly, is the number one factor that colleges and universities are going to look at. Other factors are obviously going to be standardized test scores, which we kind of talked about earlier. Academic area of interest is becoming more and more of a factor when students are applying to colleges and universities. Students that want to go into business, especially males, tend to have a little bit more of a challenging admissions process just because that schools are typically primarily male dominated. So when we start talking about science and engineering and business, which is probably the two most identified majors that we have here at the Academy, and rightfully so, that's where the vast majority of our curriculum is based. You're in an applicant pool that's going to be a little bit more competitive than if you were going to apply to liberal arts or a liberal arts school. So that's just something that we kind of keep in mind for the boys local here. The Carlson School of Management's more competitive for admission than maybe the College of Liberal Arts. Not like they don't have great students in both, but that's just the reality of the applicant pool when you submit that application. So we do say that many times when we're advising a student, we are saying to them, now, you might not be admissible to the business program. Do you want to be a gopher or do you want to be a business major? Because you have to make that choice at some point in time as you go through the process. And I think our reps are also pretty honest about that process and how much more challenging it is. A lot of schools are doing freshmen pretty much only admit to some programming. So if there is a stellar biology program, the only opportunity that you may get admitted is during a freshman year. Nursing programs have moved to that, where they're enrolling a student their freshman year and they're just looking to retain them all 4 years instead of going there and applying to that program a little bit later. So it may be a different experience than maybe what you had yourself, but that's also why we're here to kind of help guide your boys through that process and really kind of look at, what do you want to study and how can we make sure you get there. Other opportunities, obviously legacy. There's even scholarships that are tied to legacy. So I know that St. John's has a legacy application. Even the University of Iowa gives $1,000 if you've had a relative that has attended the university, and you can mark that down on the application. So there are some legacy advantages there. Special talent, that could be athletic, or that could also be music-based or theater-based. I know we have a few students this year that are going through a pretty rigorous audition process through digital video programs. So there are sometimes some extra steps that you need to go beyond the admissions office in order to secure a spot. Demographics is becoming more and more important to campuses and universities. They like to say, and when you go on a campus tour, this will be something that they brag about. We have students from all 50 states and 130 different countries. The reason why they bring that up is primarily to kind of showcase that they are attracting students from all over the place. And so demographically, sometimes with our neighbors to the east at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, they have their full of Minnesota residents. So sometimes they limit the number of residents they're going to admit from that particular state because of the need, kind of economics, demand versus supply, right? So in many other ways, that could be an advantage for a student that's from the Midwest as well, or from Minnesota. If you don't have too many students going from Minnesota to, I'll just say LSU or something like that, then that creates some geographic diversity for that particular college or university. And expressed interest is something else that's kind of come up. A lot of colleges want you to specifically express that, yes, I like you, you're my number one choice. Others, maybe even visiting campus is how you express interest. But one thing that we do know that colleges are able to do is that they can track certain aspects, especially with email. So sometimes they will monitor how many emails that they've sent to your son and how many times they've opened it. I know it's a little bit of like
Creepy.
Big Brother, creepy, but it is a technique that they quite honestly tell us that they do a lot. And not, a lot of times they're checking to see how popular an event's going to be, or what is the student's real interest in us? Because if they're not really interested in us, should we be interested in them and offering another admission spot? So that is something that has kind of percolated over the last, I'd say, 2 to 3 years.
So back to academic rigor. So pretty soon in March, we'll be meeting with your sons, with Ms. Mechtel, to talk about course planning and course selection for next year. We usually get a line of boys who tell us they want to drop their language. And then usually our first question is, what is your current grade in the class? A. B, what colleges are on your list? Because for some colleges, it may hurt their admissions decision if they drop a language. For other colleges, it doesn't. So that's typically the 2 questions that we have. And then if they want to drop the language and they have aspirations for the more selective colleges, then should be a really good reason, and they should be replacing it with another math or science. They can't take study halls, can't take tons of electives, because when they're applying to colleges in the fall of their senior year, as y'all know, it's only, the transcript shows freshman, sophomore, junior year grades only, and their senior courses in progress. So it's all they see. So if they've done well and taken really great courses, and then senior year they decide they want all fluffy classes, the colleges might say, I don't think he's really serious about my school because the rigor for our school is pretty high, and so they may pass on your student. So again, we tell them that message, and want to make sure that you know that what message we're giving them, that they should keep challenging themselves, because it's only going to set them up for success when they are freshmen in college.
We do sometimes hear that, oh, Mr. Erickson said it was totally fine that I dropped this language, and I usually say, I would never say that.
They try to pin us on
They
each
try to
other.
pin us against each other too, yes.
If he says
well,
no,
Ms.
they'll ask
Gutierrez
him, ask
said
me.
that there's no way I need physics and engineering. No, you do, so, yeah.
Any questions so far? So supporting factors for admission. Yes, as we said, that your grades, your curriculum, test scores, first primary, yes. The other things, leadership and involvement. So we tell the boys, whatever you've been involved in, stick with it. If you want to try new things, that's great. But colleges really want to see, what your boys are doing outside of the classroom. That's the reason why on the application they ask for what your involvement is, both in school and in your community. They care about activities, your community service, part-time work, summer opportunities. It's really important. And if your sons have not yet completed their service hours needed for STA, the summer really is the best time to do it. A lot of the boys try to push it off and say, oh, I'll do it in the fall. Then they realize they have essays to write. They have all the papers and all the homework, and it's senior year, and it's a lot going on that fall. If they have their senior speech early, then they don't have any time for their volunteer hours, and that adds more stress. So if your sons can start doing a little bit now, but the summer, really, by the end of summer, they really should have all their service hours done. So also then, academic area interest, special, we talked about that already, I'm sorry. And so the essays is the other huge thing. The majority of our students do apply to universities using the Common App. And the Common App takes a long time to complete. So if you've had a son or daughter that's already gone through the process pretty recently, you probably know that the Common App takes probably a good hour to fill out, to complete, especially if you're going to do it well. The essay is even worse. So the essay is usually the hardest thing for all your boys to do. It's the Common App essay and then the why essay. A lot of the colleges have, why do you want to go to Madison? Why do you want to go to Notre Dame? Those are really hard essays to write in order for them to have a really good essay. The Common App releases their essay prompt questions usually in the end of February or beginning of March. As soon as they are released, we tell the boys, hey, the essays, questions, the prompts are ready. let's get started in working on these. The English department does have them do an exercise in the fourth quarter that has the boys start their essay. But I have to say that a lot of boys don't take advantage of that, and they just do it quickly. And then over the summer, we have a lot of boys working on it, or there's also some boys that have the panic mode come September or October that they haven't written their essays at all. So the number one thing that we can say to you and to your sons is you cannot procrastinate. We are here all summer. We highly encourage you, your sons, send them to us. We'll sit them down, we'll make them fill out the application, we'll help them with their essays. The boys share them on the Google Drive with us, and we give them feedback. Because in order to write a really good essay, as I'm sure you are aware, it takes lots and lots of revisions. We tell the boys, and it's really hard for them to get started. They think it's super easy, and then when they sit down and stare at that essay prompt, they're like, I can't do this. Like, you can do it. It just takes a lot of time.
We usually are pretty good about coming up with ideas for them to kind of maybe write about, whether it's caddying, whether it's working in a kitchen, there's a lot of different things that you can write about that honestly come off as pretty interesting if you just spend a little time with it. So I would echo exactly what Norma said about us being here in the summer. Coming in for a workout anyway, come up to college counseling for 30 minutes, talk with us a little bit. The boys that have kind of taken advantage of that in the summertime are usually the ones that are feeling a lot better when October hits and they're just ready to submit applications instead of panicking about, I can't believe they're going to make me write an essay about this or essay about another topic item. So.
And usually the boys sometimes get hung up on I have to pick a topic that's really interesting. And they'll give us an essay, and of course we say it nicely, but it's like, I learned nothing about you in this essay. And that's usually when we like to have a dialogue with them, like, and ask them, what are you passionate about? Because if they write about something they're really passionate about, then when we read the admission, when they write their essay, it's a fun, interesting essay. And again, the college admission staff just want to learn more about your sons. They have your transcript, they have your application, they have your test scores, they see the list of activities that you've been involved in, so what else? And that gets a great opportunity for your boys to sell themselves and tell the admissions office how awesome they really are.
And kind of the last one that is pretty big is the application plan itself. So how are we going to apply? A lot more schools are switching over to what they call early decision or a binding agreement, meaning that if I submit an application, is it on the next one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's on both.
Thanks, got ahead of myself. Meaning that if you apply for admission and you are accepted, you sign an agreement as the parent, the student signs the agreement as, of course, the student, and then the counselor, either myself or Norma, sign the agreement as well. So everybody is on the same page with this student saying, this is my number one choice. If admitted, that's where I'm going to go. So it's becoming more popular, and it's morphing into other areas, such as we have early decision 1, which is typically in November, and then there's an early decision 2, which is typically right about now. So January 1, January 15th, February 1. January 2 is really set up for those institutions or students that maybe didn't get into their first choice college are now saying, you know what, this is the school I want to go to. I want to make sure I get there. We could go through all the other definitions, but I'd keep you here all night. So we'll just go with early action. Seems to be the most common application process. In many cases, there isn't necessarily an advantage from an admissions perspective by applying early action. You're just hearing back sooner. So most early action programs are notifying students either right before Christmas or just after the new year. So a lot of students right now are walking the halls excitedly because they're hearing back from these institutions that they applied early action to, and they're getting their positive decisions. Rolling admission is usually, I would say for a lot of institutions, they utilize rolling maybe once they've cleaned up on their early action process. So rolling admission just means that you apply, they assess it, and they give you a decision. Iowa State is a great example where I'll tell the student to hit send, tell them that they're going to hear within like 48 hours, and then confetti flies on the computer screen, and they played like a video with the CNN announcer saying that they were admitted. So it's kind of funny. There are those little marketing aspects that they do, but rolling is typically, they want to get a decision out. If your student meets a certain GPA point or your student meets a certain test score point, they're just going to move forward with a positive decision. So that's typically rolling. And these deadlines do vary. Oh yes, go ahead.
Is early action binding?
Early action is not binding. Early decision is the only binding agreement. So with early action, you would have still until typically May to confirm your enrollment. Now there is a lot more that goes on after that, but that's almost for the senior meeting with housing and orientation dates and all of those other things. But they do get kind of blitzed with emails once that positive admissions decision comes. I mean, they'll say, I'm getting like 4 or 5 emails a week from this school. And that's also, well, how interested are you in that school? Because if you're not, you might as well withdraw, and then they can use that spot for somebody else.
And some schools do have restrictive early action, and restrictive early action means that you cannot apply to another like institution early action. And when the boys, it's really confusing, but again, in the fall, we are with the seniors a lot, helping them through the process and making sure they have a game plan. And like Casey said, sometimes it's better to apply to a school early, other times it's not. And so again, that's why we like to have a conversation before your sons hit send, so we can make sure we're putting them in the best possible position, that they hopefully get a positive outcome. Because some school, it varies from school to school.
And sometimes, quite honestly, we tell a student to hold from applying because maybe C in first semester grades would be a really good idea for that particular student. Let's say they had, maybe some struggles early on in their academic career, and now they're really doing well. Then there can be an advantage to maybe holding off and us writing a letter about how wonderful the first semester is going and how, this student's ready for college, and they're proving it right now. So it provides us that opportunity too.
So service academies and ROTC. I know there's a handful of juniors out there that express some interest. And the key for if your son is thinking about ROTC or service academies is you really need to start the process now. On March 30th, we will have a night dedicated to both NCAA sports and ROTC and the service academies. Talking with someone in the leadership department is great. Also, Ms. Casey and I are great also, but again, that process needs to start so much earlier because it is so much more in depth.
Yeah, first things for the service academies, obviously that comes up is summer seminars, planning around that, or just even applying and getting that in so that you have that interest level in. Normally with the service academies, they're going to want to see a test score right away. They're going to want to see a transcript. Usually you can wait a little bit longer with the transcript, but the test score, they're going to recommend that you take the test as many times as possible because they're going to try to super score it for you. And super score means taking the best of each subsection of the exam and making one primo ACT. But it does start early, and we really encourage conversations to happen with Colonel Heathington as well, just because he can be really, I think, insightful about what the process entails. But it's long. It's a long process. I know we have a couple of, who older sons went through that process. It's long. It's stressful. So you just got to stay patient and positive with them. NCAA process. So with the NCAA, this process also starts kind of now. Recruiting processes are kind of wrapping up for the class of 2020, which means that a lot of sports are now turning to 2021. The first thing that we really hear back from coaches and even our own athletic staff is making sure that your sons are registered with the NCAA so that we can start building that profile and uploading materials once the summer of their soon-to-be rising junior year starts. So every process is different. That's why it's kind of hard to say like, okay, for A sport it's going to be just like this, and B sport it's going to be just like this. But the first step needs to be registering. If you are thinking about a Division III, it is free to register with the NCAA, so you don't have to pay the fee. But if you are looking at a Division I or II sport, you will need to register and pay $90 to be in that clearinghouse. You also want to speak very candidly with your coaches on where you really see that ability level taking you. A lot can happen, of course, in the next 18 months, but some of our sports really wrap up recruitment over the summer, and some coaches are asking for commitments August, verbal commitments in August. So signing dates and all that stuff usually happens a little bit in September, but each sport's going to have a little bit different of a signing date. Football is very different from baseball. So as you start having, or if your son is starting to express those interests, the key thing would be just to start having the conversation now so that you're really picking schools based off of where you would want to go academically and hopefully athletically. We want that still to be a good match. And I think, quite honestly, most of the boys that we've had go through have always had that in mind. Like, I only want to go play a sport somewhere if it's going to be a good academic fit for me. So I think SDA has a really healthy culture when it comes to that. So more questions on that. Obviously, save the date, March 30th. We did this last year, and it was really, really good. I thought it was really well attended. It did tend to focus a little bit more on football, so we'd like to get a little bit of variety in this one because we know we got some other sports that people are considering.
So NAVIANCE, that's how we keep track. So I think everyone in here knows what their NAVIANCE account is, right? Passwords? Yep. Awesome.
I saw all the hands come up.
Sadly, though, on January 27th, NAVIANCE is going to have new restrictions and guidelines for their password. So just be cognizant that if you know your password and you're for sure when you try to log in, it won't let you in. It's because they're changing the process. So just to give you a heads up about that. So we try to get the boys into NAVIANCE as much as possible because there is a lot of great information in it. It's not the best tool out there, but there are some really great things, but that's how we can keep track of the boys, because that's how we send the transcripts and the letters of rec. That is through NAVIANCE. So we mentioned earlier, letters of rec are key. So when we are with the juniors, like I mentioned, we're talking about letters of rec. We're giving them a form, and they have to go ask 2 teachers for letters of rec. We have warned your boys that some of the teachers do cap at how many letters of rec they can write. So early bird does get the worm. So we don't want your boys to procrastinate if they have a couple of teachers in mind that they really want them to write their letters. We're also here to help them figure out who they should be asking to write letters of rec. We've got some really good questions today. They're like, how should we decide? And typically, if they're thinking about a STEM major, then it's probably better to get a math and a science. If they're undecided or leaning more towards the arts, then really it's just variety. We don't want to get only letters from the English department or only letters from the math department. It's nice for the colleges to see a couple of different disciplines in their letters of rec. So they need 2 letters from core teachers, and there's a 3rd optional letter that they can get from either their religion teacher, from leadership, or an elective. If your son's pursuing the arts, that's a whole different, then that's building a portfolio, and that's having more arts there, and we'll have that conversation as well. So again, now is the time that they're starting to think about it. Most colleges prefer to see a junior year or senior year teacher. If they had the teacher freshman year, but they still see them often for sports or if they're in their advisory, that's fine too. Because the teacher letter of rec is really talking about how your son is in their classroom. Are they collaborative? Do they work well in a group? Do they work well independently? Are they involved? Do they come prepared and on time? Those are the types of things that the teachers write about. When Casey and I get the forms back from your sons, we enter them into NAVIANCE, and that triggers an email to the teachers that they have agreed to write a letter for your son. Earlier when I mentioned there's a survey in NAVIANCE that we want your sons to fill out. Again, that's the teachers use that to help write their letters. We do have a few teachers that write their letters over the summer, but we do give the teachers a deadline of October 1st to have their letters uploaded into NAVIANCE. That way, if your son is applying to a school that has an October 15th or November 1 deadline for an early application, that everything is ready in NAVIANCE, so when your son hits send to that college, we can in turn hit send and all the supporting documents go.
Yeah.
Do parents have access to our son's transcript through NAVIANCE?
You can't see the transcript. That's a great question. You can't see the transcript, but we will happily give you a transcript. You can just email us. We can either give you a paper form or we can email it to you. And the big difference between NAVIANCE and Unified Classroom Power School, sorry, I forget what it's called now, that only shows a GPA for the current term. If you're looking for the cumulative GPA, that's the one in NAVIANCE. Good question. So we talked about surveys. In NAVIANCE, so when you log in as a parent, one of the confusing things, it's going to say your son's name on it. A lot of parents are like, shouldn't it say my name? Like, no, you're just viewing your son's account. So it will say hello and your son's name. There is a parent survey that's in NAVIANCE that we would love for you to fill out. It really does help us with when we're meeting with your student and also helping us write the letters of rec, because y'all can give some really great insight of who your son is that we don't necessarily see here. And your son can't see it, and you can, obviously you can share it with them if you'd like to, but when you log in, you see the parent survey, your son does not see it. You can see his surveys, and you can see everything he has done in NAVIANCE, but he can't see what you have done.
And Norma really appreciates it because I usually find her crying when you talk about your favorite memory of your child.
That's my favorite
I'll be
question.
walking in and I'm like, why are you crying? Oh, you're reading parent surveys. Okay.
They're pretty sweet. I mean, it's again, your favorite memory of your son. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, they're sweet, right? I think so. Students use NAVIANCE.
So how students use NAVIANCE is basically they're going to set up kind of utilizing their list. As they start thinking about colleges, we usually say, well, go into NAVIANCE and add it to your list. A lot of times what's great on our side too is I can see what the students added, but I can also see what you all added in terms of schools. So sometimes there's a disconnect, sometimes there's not. And then I usually try to fill in the holes with maybe, okay, here's some other ones to kind of look at. But really it's just a tool that allows kind of all of us to stay on the same page with the types of schools and institutions everybody's looking to do. So we had already talked about the questionnaire. So what we'll utilize it for is, along with your son, ensure that they have the letters of rec, view any results of the questionnaires, and also submit. So NAVIANCE ends up being the brain hub for submitting all the application materials to colleges and universities. What's really great about it is that it timestamps it. So when your son opens up their portal or whatever they may be doing to look at what materials have been received or not received, they usually come and say, you didn't send my transcript. And I go, yes, I did on December 9th. I sent that transcript. Let's call the college and let them know that we sent it. And usually the college says, oh yeah, it's here. So the thing that sometimes the boys don't remember is that when you're applying to some schools, especially that have a large applicant load, it's not only your application and your transcript, it's the 3 letters of recommendation, the transcript, the counselor letter of recommendation, and all the other materials. So in many cases, those institutions are processing 500,000 pieces of information and trying to attach it to one file. So we try to remind them of that, but the more important thing is that they're following the protocols that we kind of put in place, which we'll get into next fall a little bit more heavily.
The other great tool in NAVIANCE, if you haven't found it yet, are the scattergrams. So again, when we're meeting with your sons and they're telling us about potential colleges that they're interested in, we have them look at the scattergrams, which the top line is your son's GPA to date and his test score, either the practice test score or real ACT or SAT, they've already taken it, and their PSAT, and how they align with a typical admit to that particular school. The main difference that we tell the boys is that this is comparing who's been admitted from STA. So how have STA boys done at this particular school? It doesn't show the greater population, it's just STA. So that's why we tell our seniors it's really important that they keep NAVIANCE up to date. So we mark, who's been admitted to what college, who's been deferred, who's been denied, because that helps keep the information, they're paying it forward for the next class. So your sons are gonna reap all the benefits of all the previous classes who've kept that updated. And again, that's a nice way for us when we're meeting with your sons when they're building the list, that when they're looking at the scattergrams and doing the comparison, you want to see a mixture of red and green. The red means that they don't meet the criteria or their GPA and test scores are below the typical admit, and the green obviously is yes, they are. So Nice combination of red and green, not all red, because that makes us really nervous.
And not all green either, because we
No.
want them to look at maybe having, some college choices out there that are going to be a challenge for them academically.
So the timeline. Like I said, they're reviewing the PSAT scores now. And again, it's for them to determine, do they like the ACT better or the SAT better? Like we said earlier, colleges don't care which one they like better. It really is personal choice. And some boys like one over the other. Some boys choose both. It truly is a personal preference. The benefit of the ACT is that it's offered here. We are a testing site. We offer all the ACT exams except for December. For the SAT, we only offer one SAT, and that's October, and seniors can take. Every year we have a handful of seniors that want to take the SAT in October. It's kind of that last push before the early deadlines to see if they can get a higher score. So some boys prefer to test here just for comfort level, and typically the people who are in the classroom, who they're proctors, they know the majority of the proctors. They're familiar with the campus, so that extra layer of anxiety of not knowing where they're going is alleviated because they're here at school. And I think in the email I mentioned it, I read it, but just we reminding your sons, if there's any inclination that your son wants to take the July ACT, please register now. We cannot control who registers for the test. We're just a testing site, so anyone can test here. In the last 2 years, we've had boys that wanted to test here, and we filled up, and they had to drive to Iowa and Wisconsin to take the test. So word of advice, you can register now for July. So testing plan, we are asking your boys, do they have a testing plan in place? Because everyone, again, is different, and some students are ready to start their testing process now. Other boys maybe need to wait or want to wait until June, July, or September. Visiting reps, like Casey had mentioned earlier, and doing research is key, definitely. Talked about that. Keep your grades up is the most important. And like I said, we have a summer class, so we have drop-in hours over the summer, but we also have a structured summer class for our seniors that we try to do it in August, the first week of August, and we get the schedules from band, from soccer and football, and work those classes around as much as we can opposite of those schedules, because we know the fall sports, everything gets kicked up pretty fast, and your boys' time is slowly getting away from them. Questions about the timeline? Yes?
With the upcoming ACT test, the option that's nice being here that you get the reduced amount to send it to test score to I think 4 colleges. The question came up, this is our first time through the process, and if that's the first official ACT and it's not a good score, you want to be sending those on to your school to track that?
Great question. So colleges will never look poorly on a lower score versus a higher score. They're not going to say, oh my gosh, this student got a 21, then they turned around and they got a 24, then they turned around and got a 27, then they got a 30. They'd be like, yay, look how awesome that is. He kept going up. So it will never ever hurt a student. That said, we know that the boys really get nervous about sending scores, especially that first one. So here's a twofold answer. More and more schools are going to self-reported. So if you're going on either through the Common App or the school set up a separate portal that you can go and self-report, so that's great. If your school hasn't self-reported, then it's $13 per test per college. And so come fall, you're gonna feel like you're hemorrhaging money because the send your scores, it can add up really fast, especially for college super scores. And if your son took the ACT 3 or 4 times and each section had a higher score,
Which does happen.
which can happen, just start thinking about cha-ching, 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 plus the application fees, and you're paying for testing. So it's a double-edged sword. So it's one of those questions that if your son has an idea of what colleges he might be applying, we can let them know. Today, we know that Madison, for instance, only accepts test scores directly from a testing agency. Today we know that the University of Minnesota self-reports, Marquette self-reports, Creighton self-reports, USC self-reports, Notre Dame self-reports. So we have a long list of schools that we know that accept self-reported, but we also know today who's requiring it. So, but who knows if that's going to change over the summer. We just know what their policies are right now. Hope that help answers your question. Okay, good. I lost my side. What we consist with. So again, building a college list, letters of recommendation, essay report, we talked about, essay support, talked about that, resume building. Some colleges like a resume, other colleges don't. For your son to the JO application, they have to put together a resume anyway. So a resume is always a great thing to have. And if they're gonna start applying for jobs soon, so a lot of times we try to work with the boys. There is a template in NAVIANCE so they can actually build a resume. We have been telling your sons since they were freshmen that they should start building their resume because they can forget sometimes about an award they won. As insignificant as they think it might be, the more the merrier. Again, this is their bragging sheet. And so sometimes boys have a hard time bragging about themselves. So that's why a resume sometimes is nice. It's not a have to have, sometimes it's a nice to have. And again, it depends on the college. And sometimes for scholarships that they're applying to, they want to see your resume as well. So it doesn't hurt for them to have a resume in the least. Again, it's good life skills practice, right? Looking for a job, you always need to submit a resume. So there is a template there, and we do strongly encourage your boys to complete that. All right, so then, independent counselors. We know some families have chosen to work with independent counselors, and that's fine. If you ask us if you need an independent counselor, we'll tell you we don't think it's necessary. You basically already pay for us. We are here. We are available to meet with you before school, after school, a lot of times on weekends, evenings. We really are here for you. If you do decide to work with an independent counselor, it's just better if you can let us know, just so we are aware. Again, we totally understand it's a family decision, and some independent counselors use a NAVIANCE system, and their NAVIANCE system is completely separate from ours. A lot of times students think that it's NAVIANCE, that we can see it, but if they're working with the one with the independent counselor, we don't have access to that. So they have to do everything again in STA's NAVIANCE. So again, if you decide to work with them, just let us know. But again, we don't think it's necessary. And just here's a good list for some good reads, especially for first-time parents who are having rising juniors. Just some good books for food for thought. And so again, planning ahead. Here's just some. Every month we do have coffee chats. They're open to everyone. Love to have you there. So the next one's the 27th. We don't have a theme yet for that one. If anyone has any suggestions of something that you'd like to hear more about, shoot us an email. We always take requests from you all, because again, the coffee chats are set up just to help you and answer any questions you may have. We talked about the athletic night and ROTC information night and the spring college fair. So that's the fair some of you attended last year. Every other year it's at STA. So last year it was here. This year it's, like I said, it's at Academy of Holy Angels, and then the following year it's back here at STA. That's all we have. Any other questions we have from the floor? Oh, the article, I almost forgot. This is a great article. It is a couple years old from 2017. And we do tell the boys when they're getting their admissions decisions back that sometimes they are baffled because your boys like to share everything with each other. It's today we're passing out the PSAT scores. The boys have their pamphlets open and like, oh, look what I got. What'd you get? And they're just sharing it. So they share
Oh, you got that
everything.
one wrong? I didn't get that one wrong.
Right. It's kind of funny. So they think that, you know, because their GPA and ACT scores might be similar, they think they're exactly the same. And perhaps they're both applying to the same exact school. And one gets admitted and one gets deferred, or one gets denied and one gets deferred. And they're like, it's not fair. We're the same. But if you really start peeling back the layers, your sons are not the same. You know that. Curriculum choices are different, major choices are different, and like we talked about earlier, sometimes major does matter at some schools. So this is just a great article kind of giving some insight that it's true. The admissions process, sometimes it's not fair. And sometimes there's no real answer as far as why student X got admitted and student Y didn't. Colleges can only admit so many students. They have limitations, and they have to draw a line somewhere. So again, it's just some good food for thought for you to read for this one too.
And it's done by the director of admission at Georgia Tech, and he just has some really good quotes in general. If you follow his blog, I don't know, you're probably not going to follow his blog, but one of the things he says about Georgia Tech is he goes, 85% of the students that apply to Georgia Tech would be successful here. The problem is I only have room for 15%. And so it just gives a little bit of levity to this whole process, that a lot of times it isn't that a student wasn't good enough. And that's the main thing we never want our boys to feel like, is that they weren't good enough, nor should they have their own pride or whatever be put online due to an institution that made one decision on one day. So sometimes when that does come back and it isn't the right answer that they were hoping for, they take it hard. So they're usually in our office for a little while trying to work through it all. But hopefully when they leave our office, they leave with that confidence of like, you know what, I got 5 other good choices that are going to be perfect for me, and it's their loss. And so we really try to preach that to the boys throughout this process as well.
And part of the questionnaire that we ask you to fill out is, again, you know your boys far better than we do. And if your son is a very sensitive young man, which we have many of them who are, that might take a negative decision, even though sometimes they think defer is negative. Defer is not deny. It's okay. There's some colleges who defer, everybody. But it's also, picking up an admissions plan is also how is your son's personality? Some of the students get really stressed out this time of year if they applied all regular decision because all their friends are hearing decisions back and they have nothing. Some students are okay with waiting until later. So it really is personality and how they take that information. So they're the factor to put into consideration. And to let us know if they're really sensitive or not helps us also know how we can help build their list too, because we know that if they're looking at their list and some schools give decisions really quickly, it might be a boost for them if they apply to X school and we know they're going to get a positive decision and they're going to feel good about moving forward and applying to other schools.
Yeah. I know this summer it was like, wow, that wasn't that hard. Oh, no, it's not. It's just you have to sit down and do it. And so I think sometimes getting an initial positive decision can really be like a momentum changer. So if you feel like your son's not really into the process, don't worry. Sometimes it just takes a few guys a little bit longer to embrace it.
Any other questions you have for us? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Good. If they haven't, they will be. It was supposed to be done this fall, but a lot of times too, they ask, oh, I didn't really answer those questions to the best of my ability. Could you reset it? So sometimes we reset it too. But yeah, and like I said, I think for strength finders, how many times do you sit down in an interview and the first question is, well, tell me what you're good at? Well, it's nice to have something in your back pocket so you can actually say what you're good at.
Can I ask her a question? How did you take the strengths and apply them to either a college search, or did you use it for a college search, or more in the application process?
For my school, graduate, it was more of enforcement instead of us. So it did feel like a more structured environment. So it was kind of an application. But it was great reading. It was fascinating.
Yeah, most time when parents read the results of the assessments, they're like, that's right on. That's perfect. It's pretty rare that we hear somebody's like, oh, that's not even close, or they find some way that it describes their son. Yeah.
And then you can tell if your son really took his time to fill it out or not, because if everything's neutral down the middle, they know they just click the button. So that's usually when I'm like, let's do this again. Yes.
Barbara.
The assessment that they take is the strength finder assessment, or
There's 4 assessments that we have them take throughout their time here at STA, where we go in and say, fill that out. It does start 9th grade year, because we want them to also realize, like, hey, I do study better when it's quiet. I'd like them to know that as a 9th grader rather than wait till their senior year to find that out. So some of these assessments they've done, they won't tell you they did them because they probably already forgot. But those are some of the things that we do throughout their time here at the academy, so that we can start saying, like, okay, you like this type of academic thing. Even at registration, it helps us out when they've had some of those things completed.
There's also a few in there about career interest finder.
Mhm.
There's 3 or 4. So if your sons have absolutely no idea what they want to major in, or they think they know what they want to major in, taking the career interest profilers, there's several of those, like I mentioned, is a great way for them to be like, oh, look at that. I didn't think about that career.
Far back, I think.
Yeah, if you're maybe going to college or visiting in the summer versus spring or fall, is it really any different, or are there any other factors you should be aware of? Is it all the same?
Usually the response what we get from somebody that visits in the summer is like, no one was around. Well, yeah, no one is around. I mean, you're talking primarily graduate students and, some faculty. So that's kind of the major thing, but we kind of tell them to look beyond it. You're still going to see some of the facilities. Imagine that lecture hall is full. Yes, you are going to have to walk that far in order to get to class. If you're talking about a larger campus, smaller campuses, there might be more intentional things that they'll do for the student, and that's what we kind of liken it to. So if we say, hey, did you notice when you went to the U of M, we only went on one of the 3 sections of the campus, and when you went to Marquette, they brought you to the engineering section, and your tour guide was led by an engineer, and this was already set up for you, and you didn't even have to ask any special permission. A lot of times that gets those boys thinking a little bit too. Oh yeah, I had a dance major at the U of M give me a tour. She didn't know anything about engineering. She was nice, but I mean, so a lot of times we liken that to the experience that they're likely going to have on campus. You could have all of those things done for you at the U of M. You just have to ask for it, right? And so those are also really good, like, kind of takeaways that I tell the boys about. And I think you as parents can really do a good job of having them discover that on their own too. So yeah, even if you're going to visit a school in the summer, letting them know, hey, it's not going to be action-packed. I mean, when you go to the University of Nebraska in the summer, there's not 86,000 fans that are going to be in the stadium. But, there are some things you can try to visualize so that you can see if it's a good fit. But we're always going to recommend going on campuses, no matter what time of year. And quite honestly, your boys' schedules are so crazy, you might only have a snippet of time to do that as well.
Some colleges do have events in the summer. The U of M has, they call it sneak previews for each of the 7 freshman admitting colleges. Minnesota has a week of private college week. So all the private colleges in Minnesota have a week of visits. There's morning and afternoon that you can hit 2 in a day. Wisconsin also does it, as does Iowa for the private schools. So some colleges do have these special events. So it's another great way to go, because typically if they're going to be hosting a big event, they're going to have more students involved in that process. So it gives you an opportunity to ask current students some questions as well.
I'd also say too, you can start local. I mean, we are kind of blessed here in Minnesota with having a wide variety of schools that you can visit, even in the metropolitan area. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go to UST, but you can check it out. And if you come back, I like UST, I just don't like that it's in St. Paul. Well, we can come up with 6 to 7 other schools that gets you out of Minnesota, but on a similar campus feel. Same thing with the University of Minnesota. I think if you visit that, then you can get an idea of what it's like to just be on a big school campus without having to fly, all over the country.
Is there a question over here? Yep. Correct. Correct.
A little bit of both. We assign, each one of your boys was assigned to one of us last year, actually. So with that assignment, we tweak it as we go and get to know them a little bit more, maybe who's going to be a better fit. We have similar styles, but not the same style. So I think a lot of times we like a home base counselor, But really, I mean, my students go to Norma all the time for questions, or if I'm away or with another student. Some boys just don't care. They'll go to either one of us. So we just like to have a home base, so at least we know that somebody's monitoring the things that they're supposed to be doing and the things that they need to get done.
Any other questions? Well, thank you again so much for coming tonight. We appreciate your time. And like we said, we're always here for you. Call us, email us. We're here for you. And anything we can do to help you through this process, we'll do. Have a great night.
Thank you. Ooh, we got applause.